Single mom's unexpected apology to CEO reveals an incredible moment of hope and transformation. Sarah stood at her usual spot in the diner, the hum of chatter and clinking silverware a familiar backdrop to her everyday struggles. A warm cup of coffee in hand, she served 2 tables simultaneously, her mind racing with the demands of another long shift. In the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of the news flashing on the diner's small television. The headline struck her like a lightning bolt. A massive corporation, led by the formidable CEO James, was restructuring, threatening the livelihoods of families in her town. The weight of her own overdue bills tightened around her chest. Here she was, a single mother of 2, trying to ensure a stable life, fearing her children might have to endure the hardships she'd fought tooth and nail to avoid. The thought made her stomach churn. Days rolled into weeks, and every moment felt like walking on a tightrope. Between managing a mostly absent ex-husband and the relentless realities of raising her kids, Sarah's sense of control was slipping. The prospect that James's decisions could further jeopardize her community sent waves of anxiety surging through her. Could it be that a cold businessman in a distant glass tower could determine their fate, casting families into turmoil? The thought gnawed at her insides. She could almost hear the voices of her children, asking for simple things, a new pair of shoes, a class trip. Could she even fix what was about to unravel? As the town hall meeting approached, Sarah felt a flicker of resolve. Just the opportunity to voice her fears felt like a rebellion against her mounting pressures. But standing against James, with his polished suit and unflinching delivery, seemed a daunting challenge. What could a waitress from the diner possibly convey to a man like him? Yet, that very fear propelled her forward. She could not stay silent. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The evening of the meeting arrived, and Sarah felt the walls closing in as she sat among her neighbors. When James made his entrance, confidence radiated from him as he began outlining the company's plans. Each slide flashed before her like a countdown to an uncertain future. It was not just talk, it was a harsh reality looming over families who relied on these jobs. Finally, as if her heartbeat was now audible to the entire room, she stood, trembling with a mix of fear and fierce determination. The eyes of the townsfolk turned toward her, amplifying her feelings of exposure. "Look, this isn't just business to us," her voice cracked. "We have families to support, children to feed." The words shot out before she could stop them, and she watched as shock flitted across James's face. But in that heated moment, her anger spilled over, curling itself around her despair like a weighted blanket. "You don't understand what your decisions do to people like me!" Silence enveloped the space. Her heart raced, a whirlwind of vulnerability crashing over her. She was just a waitress with overdue bills, but in that moment, she was a warrior. Then, in a breathless moment, she apologized for her outburst, recognition dawning within her eyes as she glimpsed humanity reflected in his, an unexpected connection between 2 vastly different worlds. But could this fragile bridge withstand the shifting tides of their realities? Her future, and perhaps the fate of her community, hung precariously in this moment, and Sarah felt its weight calling her to act, by engaging with the very man who threatened her life. Would this be the wound that finally opened the door to healing, or yet another disappointment? The aftermath echoed around her like a thunderclap, reverberating through Sarah's chest. The room felt thick with tension, and she could see the disbelief written on the faces of her neighbors. She had done it, opened her mouth against a titan. But part of her was wondering whether her words had landed or simply faded into the air like smoke from a distant fire. James stood, uncertain for the first time, shifting his weight from one polished shoe to the other. The paused silence seemed to stretch for eternity. "Thank you for your Passion, he finally remarked, trying to regain control. The moment was surreal. Here was this man, accustomed to boardrooms, now addressing a waitress who had summoned enough courage to challenge him. As she sat down, an odd mixture of satisfaction and dread washed over her. She had made her voice heard, but what would come next? Would he dismiss her as just another pesky critic, or was there a chance that her honesty could fire up a conversation? As she poured coffee for a nearby couple, her hands trembled ever so slightly. Every sip she served now served as a reminder that she stood up for more than herself. It was a spark, but she didn't yet know the fuel it would require to grow into a flame. What followed was a complex sea of thoughts, wild swirls of hope, fear, and a deluge of questions about her own future. Would she continue at the diner, trapped in a cycle of grueling shifts and constant worry? Or was there a chance for something greater? Over the next few days, she couldn't shake the encounter from her mind. Her resolve felt emboldened, yet there was uncertainty about whether her plea would reverberate in the corporate corridors where decisions were made. Late at night, as her children slept, Sarah began drafting a letter, one that would not simply express her concerns, but one that would seek understanding and possibly a dialogue. What could she do? She was just a waitress. But perhaps with the right words, she could become a voice for those too afraid to speak. The act of writing felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Each phrase was imbued with her realities, her frustrations, her desires for a better future for her children. With precision, she articulated her thoughts. There were lessons about resilience, struggles that connected single parents, and the impacts James's decisions had on families like hers. The letter transformed from an angry outburst to a heartfelt plea. As she sealed the envelope, the weight of it felt heavier than it should. Was it merely paper, or was it the embodiment of her shifting identity? For too long, she'd been just Sarah, the waitress. But after that town hall meeting, she felt the stirring of something more, a realization that she could carry her experiences and channel them into something impactful. Yet, beneath that newfound clarity, dread gnawed at her resolve. What if he never even opened the letter? What if she was simply wasting her time, clinging to a dream destined to crumble? Regardless, she decided to deliver it in person. The thought of confronting James again, this time properly, sent shivers down her spine. The adrenaline rush of being a direct participant in change was intoxicating, but it brought with it a flurry of self-doubt. The day arrived. She stood before the corporate building, acutely aware of her attire, faded jeans and an old cardigan. She felt woefully out of place. Yet she remembered her children's faces and the promise she had made to carve a better life for them. As she approached the entrance, her heart raced with every step. This wasn't just a letter. It was her chance to confront the storm directly. But just as she reached out to pull the door, an unsettling thought crossed her mind. What if the man she once thought was a cold, unfeeling CEO turned out to carry the weight of his own regrets? The moment of truth hovered, and in that liminal space, she steadied herself for what lay ahead. Would this meeting fortify her or dismantle her ambitions entirely? And more importantly, would James be open to the conversation she desperately sought? As she took a deep breath, ready to step into the unknown, one thing became unequivocally clear. The time had come to face her fears and fight for what she believed in. Would she find a common thread between their lives, or would the divide remain unbridgeable? The door swung open with a heavy creak, the polished wood framing a world that felt both intimidating and surreal. Sarah hesitated, her breath hitching in her throat as she stepped into the lobby. The stark contrast of her surroundings engulfed her: gleaming marble floors, the hum of business conversations, and the faint scent of expense-laden air freshener felt like a million miles away from her life at the diner. She stood clutching the envelope like a lifebuoy. The grandeur of the corporate environment clawed at her nerves, making her feel small and inconsequential. Yet the resolve that had grown inside her since the town hall meeting fueled her determination. If there was ever a time to take a stand, it was now. As she approached the reception desk, she kept her shoulders squared. The receptionist looked up from her screen, arching an eyebrow at her casual attire. "Can I help you?" With the slightest tremor in her voice, Sarah replied, "I'm here to see James Cooper." The receptionist's lips curled slightly, not quite a smile. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I have something important to deliver." The words spilled out, almost impulsively. The receptionist's gaze shifted, regarding Sarah with a hint of skepticism, before reaching for her phone. With a curt nod, she initiated a call, and Sarah's heart raced. Each ring felt like an eternity, stacking layers of anticipation on her already frazzled composure. "Mr. Cooper, there's a woman here who wishes to speak with you." The words rushed through Sarah's mind, drowning her in anxiety. She couldn't afford to back down now. This letter, her thoughts, it mattered too much. What if it turned into yet another fading hope, another moment lost amid corporate chatter? "Send her in." Mr. Cooper's voice resonated through the phone, authoritative yet unyielding. The receptionist gestured toward the corridor leading to his office, and Sarah's stomach fluttered. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to recall the countless times she navigated the delicate dance of patrons at the diner, each conversation a careful choreography of balance and assurance. As she crossed the threshold into his office, the walls felt insulated from the outside world, amplifying the gravity of what lay ahead. James stood by the window, a silhouette against the urban landscape. "Hello, Sarah. You came." Through the layers of wool trench coat and tailored attire, she sensed an unexpected warmth in his demeanor. It grounded her, nudging her closer to the reality she longed to confront. "I wanted to talk about the letter," she started, her voice testing the waters, weary yet steady. "It's about the impact decisions at your level can have on families like mine. It's not just numbers and statistics." James nodded, his focus shifting from the skyline to her, revealing curiosity, a flicker of engagement she wasn't sure she'd find. "I feel like my voice has been absent. I work hard, and despite everything, I'm afraid of what the future holds for my children. Your choices affect us, and I wanted you to know that." The glint in his eyes suggested the walls he'd built around himself were beginning to tremble. As he leaned against his desk, he appeared less a titan and more of a man in a conversation. The facade was cracking. "I appreciate your honesty, Sarah," he replied, his voice softer now, containing an echo of self-reflection. "Most choose silence or avoidance." A shift happened between them. Her insistent words had opened a dialogue, one that felt inherently outside their worlds, yet harmoniously intertwined. In that moment, vagueness yielded to authentic connection. With each exchanged glance, Sarah cataloged every change in his expression, dissecting each hint of vulnerability that punctured through his confident exterior. In this brief encounter, she discovered her approach could sway not just her narrative, but his too. The realization ignited a flame within her. Perhaps there was more power in honesty than she'd ever known. It was a lesson she'd carry with her, extending beyond this moment of transformative uncertainty. But just as hope began to settle in her heart, a thought struck her. Would they actually pursue change from this conversation? As she grappled with this new possibility, her resolve hardened. "Will you consider our stories when making future decisions?" she pressed, her eyes locking onto his in a plea not merely for herself, but for every individual struggling under the weight of corporate oversight. The challenge hung heavy in the air, and she could see him weighing the implications of her words. It was a new frontier for both of them. The possibility of lasting impact loomed above them, but would it take flight or falter? The silence grew tense, wrapping around them like a tightening noose, as she waited for his response, the very response that could tip the scales between standing up and stepping back. "I don't know what the future holds, but—" Sarah's breath caught as she leaned in, ready to give everything her courage could allow. The weight of that moment was unbearable, yet electrifying. Everything hung in the balance, waiting to unfold. Would they stand together, or would the chasm remain unbridged? The moment stretched, a delicate balance teetering between uncertainty and possibility. Sarah's heart raced, every thrum resonating with her desperation and hope. She wrestled with a lump caught in her throat, scanning James's face for signs of what lay beneath his composed exterior. He appeared caught in thought, the weight of her words entwining them in an undeniable, fragile bond. "I'll do my best to listen," he finally said, and the sincerity in his voice rippled through her, igniting something fierce within. She hadn't expected an open door, yet here it was, ajar, and all she had to do was step through. "Thank you," she breathed, allowing a sliver of relief to break through the weight pressing against her chest. But beneath that elation, a trail of doubt curled back into her thoughts. Did he truly mean it, or was this mere corporate courtesy? As they conversed, navigating the layers of their disparate lives, a realization crept in. This was bigger than just a letter. It was about transformation, not only for her, but also for him. The cracks in his corporate armor were widening, revealing glimpses of a man navigating his own burdens. "We need to know that there are consequences, real consequences," she urged, her voice gaining strength. "When you make decisions, the ripples affect families, workers. We aren't equations, we're real." James nodded, the shadows of contemplation deepening around his eyes. "I understand that now, in a way I hadn't before." He glanced back at the skyline, perhaps seeing more than just glass and metal for the first time. Sarah sensed an opening, an invitation to push further, to explore what lay ahead, not just for herself, but for the unseen faces behind those decisions. "Can we find a way for me to share these stories? For my community?" She felt vulnerable asking, aware of the stakes she placed on this one conversation. The nature of corporate corridors often leaned toward dismissiveness, but here, with James, the atmosphere buzzed with a strange sense of kinship. This man, so entrenched in a world of spreadsheets and bottom lines, was now listening to her, absorbing her reality. "I could arrange a community meeting, an opportunity to share these stories," he offered, a plan forming as his brow furrowed in thought. "But it needs to be genuine. I don't want this to become another empty promise." Her heart raced at his words. A community meeting, a chance for others to step forward, to echo the narratives that burdened them. It was a glimmer of potential she had only dreamed of. "Yes, we can organize it, together." There it was, collaboration woven into the very foundation of her firm resolve. For the first time, the path before her felt tangible, transformative even. She could become not just a voice, but a vessel for change. But as elation surged through the cracks of her apprehension, another realization crept into her mind. This was not the end, it was merely the beginning of a daunting challenge. Her heart thudded with the weight of expectation, the responsibility to not only speak, but to show up, to rally others to share their truths. And then a thought flickered in the back of her mind. What if this was a double-edged sword? Would she be strong enough to bear the responsibility, especially if the change didn't come as swiftly as hope demanded? With a newfound determination, Sarah met his gaze once again. "Thank you for this opportunity, James." The gratitude was genuine, but beneath it lay a pulse of urgency stirring in her veins. "I promise to bring our stories to light." James's eyes held a spark of something unexpected, a mixture of respect and apprehension. "I hope I can meet those expectations, Sarah. This is uncharted territory for both of us." As their voices faded into the corners of his office filled with possibilities, she realized that she was no longer just a single mother, clutching to the threads of hope. She was a catalyst for change, poised on the brink of an extraordinary journey that would test her resolve, her resilience, the very essence of who she had become. Yet, in the gentle hum of excitement and fear coiling tightly together, a new question surged. Could she truly trust him to honor their shared moment? As the outlines of the next steps began to form in her mind, the weight of hesitation still lingered. "Let's start tomorrow," she proposed, her voice cutting through the tension. But within, uncertainty still lingered. Secrets remained to be unraveled, and the true measure of this endeavor lay hidden in the decisions yet to unfold. Would they both be brave enough to confront the challenges awaiting them? As Sarah stepped out of the office, the door closing softly behind her, she felt the enormity of the path stretched ahead. Would she emerge as an advocate for her community, or would the demands of the corporate world overshadow her ambitions? In the depths of her mind, the anticipation brewed like a storm ready to break. The morning light spilled into Sarah's kitchen, illuminating the stack of papers that cluttered her table. Each page represented a voice, a story waiting to be shared. As she brewed her coffee, the aroma filled her senses, both comforting and invigorating. Today, she would take the first step towards something monumental, yet the weight of expectation pressed heavily on her shoulders. She dialed the number for James, anxiety curling in her stomach. Would he still be as committed to this mission now that the initial thrill had worn off? He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. "Good morning, Sarah. Are you ready?" The simple question pulled her from a whirlpool of doubt. "Yes," she replied, though her heart surged with uncertainty. "I'm ready to begin." They agreed to meet at a small cafe near the office, a public space that would provide a backdrop for their plans. As she drove through the morning traffic, she reflected on the significance of the meeting. This was more than just a collaboration. It was her chance to advocate for her community, to be the change she had so long yearned for. When she arrived, James was already there, scanning the menu with an intensity that reminded her of their first conversation. His demeanor had shifted slightly, a touch of seriousness mingling with the eagerness in his eyes. She couldn't help but wonder if the weight of their undertaking rested on his mind as heavily as it was on hers. "Simpler than I expected, isn't it?" he remarked as she slid into her seat. "Is it, or is it a facade?" she countered. Their dialogue felt charged with unspoken realities. The nature of their partnership begged deeper examination. What true commitment meant in a world often marred by corporate apathy? James gave a thoughtful nod. "Let's make it genuine," he affirmed. Yet as he spoke, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his expression. The struggle for authenticity was real, shadows lurking around their earnest intentions. Together, they sketched a rough outline for the community meeting, discussing potential venues, participants, and logistics. With each collaborative idea, Sarah felt a lightness surge through her. Dismantling the doubts that had clung to her from the previous day. He was engaging, willing to listen, and for every concern she raised about reaching out to vulnerable stories, he offered understanding solutions. Yet she sensed something lurking beneath this initial collaboration, a fear that ignited her instincts. What if this was just a corporate facade to appease her, to silence her? Would they truly follow through, or would it disintegrate into another broken promise? The conversation shifted toward the function of power. "It's easy to get caught up in numbers," Sarah admitted, leaning back in his chair, his voice lowering. "I've learned the hard way that behind every decision there are lives affected. But still, I wrestle with the structure of this world." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. Here was an opportunity to confront not just the corporate structure, but the fundamental beliefs that govern the lives intertwined within it. What if you could influence change beyond the spreadsheets? What if you could elevate these stories to push the company towards accountability? For a moment, she caught him off guard, an implication rippling in the air between them. The conversation had unearthed deeper desires within her, a passion for not only sharing stories, but instigating real, tangible consequences from them. "Your words matter, Sarah," he said quietly, the determination in his gaze igniting her resolve. "But if we commit to this, we must confront those uncomfortable truths together. The prospect of facing the harsh realities of corporate decisions felt daunting. Yet at that moment, Sarah understood the full weight of their alliance. They were standing at the precipice of potential change, faced with the inherent dangers of their endeavor. But less than a heartbeat later, another thought threaded through her, a question of her own capability. Would she be able to shoulder this responsibility? With every story shared, would she be prepared for the backlash if they unraveled the status quo? "Then let's commit to this, James," she said, her voice steady with resolve. "But we do so knowing we might face pushback. It won't be easy." "Nothing worthwhile ever is," he replied, a hint of a smile breaking through. As they finished their meeting, Sarah felt a strange balance shift within her, a blend of fear and exhilaration. They had crossed into uncharted territory, yet the resonance of their conversation lingered like a pulse in her mind, reminding her of why they were here. Exiting the cafe, a gust of wind swept past, shaking her back to the present. The world around her felt alive with possibility, each step carrying the weight of her purpose. But the tangle of anxiety about what lay ahead demanded consideration. Were they truly prepared to face the storm? In the days to come, their commitment would be tested in ways she couldn't predict. What cracks in the corporate facade would emerge as they pushed for change? And would they have the courage to navigate the fallout that was bound to ensue? The true challenge loomed, and Sarah knew she had to confront it head-on. The moment of reckoning was approaching, and only time would reveal their path. The following week unfolded like a sequence of rapid, chaotic events. Each morning, Sarah woke with the weight of what was at stake pressing down on her chest. The conversations with James had ignited a flicker of hope, yet that flame was often overshadowed by uncertainty. With every story she sifted through, the responsibility felt heavier, to accurately capture the essence of each life tangled within the corporate machine's gears. They had established a tentative timeline, deciding on dates for interviews and drafting a format for their eventual presentation. The to-do list on her whiteboard had become a canvas for dreams and fears alike. She meticulously noted every detail: the names of those who had agreed to share their experiences, the set locations where they would meet, the methods for collecting feedback. But with every tick, a gnawing doubt crept in. Was she truly the right person to tell these stories? To combat this wavering confidence, Sarah devoted evenings to researching transformative storytelling techniques. She recaptured interviews from pioneers in social movements, absorbing their strategies for connecting the personal with the systemic. Her space was littered with books on narrative construction and impact measurement. Yet, among the pages and notes, she often wrestled with a haunting thought. If the corporate world was slow to change, how could her work possibly shift the tides? One fateful afternoon, Sarah received an unexpected email from James. Urging urgency, his words highlighted a corporate meeting scheduled for next week, a session aimed at reviewing initiatives linked to employee engagement and community outreach. "We must be prepared to defend our vision," he emphasized. "Let's align our narrative with the data." The reality hit her like a slap. This was their chance to present the voices they had gathered, not just as numbers in a report, but as integral parts of a larger story. The adrenaline surged through her. This was the labor of love they had talked about. Yet, as days dwindled down to the meeting, the emotional stakes seemed to rise. Plagued by questions about how they would be received, doubts about her ability began spiraling. The tension manifested in sleepless nights spent mulling over her inadequacies. Would they dismiss her findings as mere anecdotes? Would they truly see the relevance of these real stories? On the night before the meeting, Sarah sat alone at her kitchen table, combing through the collected testimonies. As she read their poignant words, stories of struggle, resilience, and hope, something clicked deep within her. This wasn't just data. It was a manifestation of real lives, experiences intertwined with her own vision for a more inclusive workplace. For a moment, tears blurred her sight, and she questioned whether she was betraying their narratives by not believing in their power. With surprising clarity, she jotted down notes. Each voice she had documented became a reminder of the responsibility she carried, transforming her apprehension into a fierce determination. No longer was she just an advocate, she was a conduit for change. As she prepared her notes for the morning's presentation, the weight had transformed from burden to empowerment. She had an obligation to these stories, and she would harness that obligation to evoke change, no matter the pushback that might surge. In that moment, she realized that the challenge ahead was not solely about the data they would present. It was about how they would address the inevitable sense of resistance. They were not just confronting a policy, they were voicing the truths of people who felt unheard. Drained yet energized, Sarah finally laid down to rest, her resolve crystallizing around her purpose. Tomorrow would be a defining moment, both for her and those she aimed to represent. But would her newfound conviction withstand the scrutiny of the corporate boardroom? Would she remain steadfast when confronted with skepticism? The looming uncertainty curled in the corners of her mind, demanding answers. As she drifted into sleep, one thought echoed within her. Tomorrow was more than just a meeting. It was a test of her commitment to not only advocating for change, but embodying it. The stakes had never been higher. The morning sun clawed its way through the kitchen window, punctuating the moments leading up to Sarah's departure for the meeting. She moved through her morning routine like an automaton, fighting against the pulse of anxiety thrumming in her veins. The clock in the hall ticked away relentlessly, and each sound was a reminder of the looming confrontation. Breath steady but heart racing, she finally gathered her presentation materials. The folder felt heavy in her hands, not just from the weight of papers, but from the stories, hopes, and dreams contained within. It was too significant to simply be about work. It was a testament to the lives she hoped to honor. On the drive to the office, her mind drifted between affirmations and fears. What if they dismissed her? What if her efforts to humanize these statistics fell flat? The familiar knot in her stomach twisted tighter as she recalled the individual narratives. The mother who had sacrificed her dreams for her children's futures, the veteran haunted by a lack of support from the workplace. Each spoke not only of hardship, but of resilience, ambition, and a longing for a better corporate culture. She fought a wave of frustration. They deserved to be heard. As she entered the building, a tangible buzz filled the air. Colleagues mingled casually in the corridors, while she felt as though she was walking through a storm. The vibrant energy felt like a million voices screaming skepticism. The board of directors were notorious for their hard-nosed pragmatism. James spotted her in the crowd and offered a supportive smile. It was a fleeting reminder that her partner in this venture had faith in their cause. "You ready?" he asked, his tone light but unwavering. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, supplying a smile that barely grazed the surface of her anxiety. When they entered the meeting room, the atmosphere shifted instantly. A long table, polished and imposing, surrounded them. The executives, faces fixed in their usual concentration, awaited the presentation with a mix of curiosity and scrutiny. Sarah took her seat, her pulse quickening. As James began outlining their framework for engagement, she felt the tension coiling around her like a vice. It was now or never, her time to shine and show the value of authenticity over statistics. The initial slides rolled on, showcasing numbers and trends. Sarah's gaze moved between James and the board, focusing on gathering a sense of how her voice would weave through the masculine boardroom tones. As data and graphs flashed across the screen, she stole moments to breathe and center herself. This wasn't just about numbers, it was about the lives that lived behind them. Finally, as the presentation made a natural segue into personal testimonies, she felt the moment approach, the point where it was time to harness her conviction. She could sense the shift in the room as she prepared to introduce the stories of individuals risking the admission of their vulnerabilities. "Stories matter," she began, her voice steadying. "They make us human. They reflect our collective experiences and reveal the need for change from within." As she spoke, the most daunting board member, a woman known for her icy demeanor, raised an eyebrow. Sarah felt pinned under her gaze, every instinct screaming to retreat. Yet this was the moment that would define her. She continued, delving into the first story, her voice carrying compassion, conviction, and the weight of truth. Just as the words began weaving a tapestry of understanding, the room began to transform. She watched as the board's posture shifted from skepticism to engagement. Questions arose, but not those mired in dismissal. They were inquiries seeking clarity. Conversations sparked, and Sarah found the humanity being woven back into their dialogue, igniting something deeper within her. But as the atmosphere warmed, the clock continued its steady beat, reminding her they still had hurdles to face. She knew not everyone would embrace this change readily. Her next challenge was inevitable. She had to confront the looming shadow of ambivalence still present in the room. As her final testimonies unfolded, a majestic sense of urgency propelled her. How would she navigate the pushback that was almost certain to arise? The vision she held for her purpose flickered, urging her to be both bold and vulnerable. Sarah recognized the path laying before her was about more than just convincing the board. It demanded an unwavering faith in the power of real stories. Would they respect the pulse of this movement, or continue to treat it as data, she wondered, bracing for a confrontation that would reveal not only their resolve, but ultimately hers as well. The moment drew closer. A defining trial awaited her, one which would challenge the very foundation of her beliefs and determination. And as the meeting progressed, a murmur arose that stilled her heart. Would Sarah's journey toward transformation orchestrate a pivotal confrontation or force her to grapple with the shadows of resistance still within the corporate culture? The tension in the room was palpable, an invisible web of expectations thick with skepticism and hope. As Sarah concluded her final story, a silence enveloped them, punctuated only by the soft rustle of papers and the distant hum of the air conditioning. She searched the faces of the executives, trying to glean any hint of understanding, or at the very least, an openness to the transformative power she had just described. Then, the icy board member, known for her biting critiques, leaned forward, her fingers steepling beneath her chin. "You believe that these personal stories are enough to shift our entire framework of engagement?" Her voice wielded a sharp edge, cutting through the air with deliberate precision. Sarah felt a tidal wave of doubt crash against her resolve. Would her stories be reduced to anecdotes that would dissolve in the harsh light of corporate analysis? Her mind raced for the right response, one that wouldn't retreat into defensiveness, but instead stood firm in conviction. "Yes," she managed, her voice steadying. "These stories are a reflection of our collective failures and successes, and they highlight the very real need for change. We cannot ignore the human element any longer if we are to foster a productive and engaged workforce." The boardroom atmosphere shifted, but doubt still lingered. Another board member, a man laden with experience and a reputation for being the voice of rational critique, interjected. "But aren't we taking a risk in prioritizing emotional engagement over data?" A flicker of frustration ignited within Sarah. She could sense James shifting nervously beside her, but she had no time for trepidation. "What is data without context?" she countered, her cheeks flushed with determination. "It's just numbers on a page. The heart of our organization is not defined by statistics alone, but by the stories of our people. Ignoring this means perpetuating a culture of disengagement that affects not just our bottom line, but also the very fabric of our society." Suddenly, the conversations took on a different tone, and several board members began sharing their thoughts, expressing concern not just for the organization, but also for their own experiences, isolated moments of empathy, doubts, and struggles, all echoing the lives represented in Sarah's narratives. She felt hope swell within her, igniting a spark of confidence. This dialogue was the opening she had yearned for. As the discussions intensified, she recognized the potential for her ideas to blossom. New alliances were forming, and perspectives were shifting. But the discomfort lingered. Several executives still regarded her with skepticism, and a murmur of discontent rippled through the room. Was her vision clear enough to stand against the formidable resistance of traditional corporate thinking? James caught her eye and nodded, silently urging her forward. It fueled her determination, reminding her of the woman who had sacrificed her dreams just to give her children a chance to thrive. That mother was not just a statistic, she was a powerful force for change. "Let's face it," she spoke again, a wave of boldness rising within her. "Companies fail when they forget their humanity. I have seen firsthand how a shift in perspective, an embrace of vulnerability, can humanize our workplaces and lead to organic growth." As her words hung in the air, she could feel the walls around the board softening, transforming from defense to curiosity. It became palpable. There was an unspoken realization that underneath the veneer of business as usual lay an opportunity for development, evolution, and vulnerability. Just as an unexpected applause entered the conversation, the meeting was interrupted by the arrival of the CEO, known for her adroit ability to navigate turbulent discussions. The room instantly shifted. Her presence was commanding, and the board fell silent, awaiting her insight. Sarah's heart raced again, for the moment had come that could plunge her efforts into either ruin or a new wave of momentum. The vision she had labored for now lay at the threshold of a critical evaluation. "Let's hear what you've gathered." The CEO's gaze flitted between the board members and then landed on Sarah, her expression unreadable but intensely scrutinizing. This was a defining moment, and Sarah understood the stakes. Would she courageously convey the stories of the individuals she had fought for, or would she retreat into the safety of data, forfeiting the impactful difference her narrative could make? As Sarah opened her mouth to respond, a rush of clarity flooded her mind. The weight of her purpose centered her. It was time to seize the moment that could change everything, and her words could either breathe life into the cold boardroom or fade into conformity. Would her passionate defense of these human narratives resonate, or would she face the harsh reality of corporate indifference? The CEO's piercing gaze bore into Sarah, urging her to speak, yet a moment of paralyzing uncertainty held her captive. The silence felt like an eternity as she wrestled with the fear that her chance to create meaningful change could slip away. Was she truly ready to advocate for the voices she represented? Each second dripped with tension, yet deep within, the core of her resolve solidified. "I believe we have the capacity to redefine success," Sarah finally stated, her voice unwavering despite the quickening of her pulse. "What we measure, the stories we share, those can either empower our employees or stifle them." The words felt heavy with significance as they left her lips, solidifying her intention. A faint murmur rippled through the board, some nodding in tacit approval, while others remained statuesque and unforgiving. She could sense the internal divide, each facial expression a silent discourse that contrasted skepticism with curiosity. In that moment, Sarah understood. A catalyst was required. "Let me share a different kind of data." She took a deep breath, channeling the energy around her into a singular purpose. Imagine a single mother struggling to balance work and family. Her dynamic relationship with her employer affects not just her performance, but the culture of the workplace itself. Her story is a microcosm of the challenges many harbor but seldom voice. The room stirred. Stories of personal struggle were familiar. They twinkled with recognition in some eyes. She pressed on. "When we invest in understanding these human experiences, we unlock potential hidden beneath traditional metrics. The ebb and flow of our workforce's emotional well-being translates to tangible outcomes. Do we not then bear a responsibility to ensure that these stories are told?" A board member furrowed his brow, resistant in his approach. But can we afford to integrate these stories into our corporate strategy without sacrificing efficiency? Efficiency has a price, Sarah countered swiftly, her conviction acting as a protective armor. A disengaged employee affects productivity far beyond what any statistic can portray. Their story can influence their performance. It creates a ripple effect, not just on the individual, but across the organization. Each word formed a bridge from doubt to understanding, resonating with faint yet palpable transformations in the room. The CEO's expression remained inscrutable, a blend of contemplation and intrigue. Sarah realized that at this moment she was not just advocating for the implementation of her ideas, she was articulating her journey and the journeys of countless others like her. This no longer felt like merely presenting a proposal. It was a historic rendition of resilience and hope. James leaned forward, suddenly illuminated by a moment of clarity. What if we implement a program where employees share their experiences, a dedicated platform to cultivate these narratives, so we can learn and strategize through them? The proposition breathed new life into the discussion, sparking ideas that bounced fervently around the table. As hope surged through her, Sarah felt a swell of belief that engaged narratives could lighten the corporate heaviness that often suffocated creativity. She watched executives scribble notes and share glances that held the promise of change. But amid the growing momentum, a haunting thought flickered to the forefront of her mind. What if this was merely an illusion of collective progress? What if, in the practicality of corporate structures, her vision fell short once again? Before she could dwell too long in doubt, the CEO spoke, her voice cutting through the charged atmosphere. "It sounds promising, Sarah, yet how do you propose we measure the success of this program?" For one fleeting moment, panic surged through Sarah. She hadn't yet quantified the emotional impact of storytelling, hadn't drawn clear lines between its qualitative nature and measurable outcomes. What if she had ventured too far into the soft emotional landscape, leaving hard metrics behind? Determined not to falter, she scanned the faces in the room. They were receptive and perhaps even anxious for solutions. We can start small. Pilot programs, surveys, employee retention rates, subsequent engagement levels. We will utilize a mix of quantitative data to support qualitative narratives, Sarah proposed, her excitement morphing into a strategic outline that unraveled in real time. A flicker of excitement danced among some board members, but she sensed lingering trepidation among others. Sarah had reignited hope, yet skeptical shadows lingered. Time to see what unfolds next, she thought, stealing glances at the CEO, whose response could sway the entire trajectory of their emerging program. Amid the uncertainty, one thought echoed louder than the rest. What did she truly believe? Would her steadfast faith in storytelling withstand the pragmatic demands of their industry? This introspection would hang in the balance, a test of her convictions, as the narrative of her own transformation unfolded before her very eyes. Would she rise to the challenge and redefine the corporate landscape, or would her resolve crumble under the weight of tradition? The moment of truth loomed, inching closer with every tick of the clock. The tension in the room was palpable as Sarah gathered her thoughts, her resolve solidifying around the purpose she had nurtured. "Measuring success in this initiative is essential," she began, her voice like an anchor in the tempest of uncertainty surrounding her. "We'll incorporate both quantitative metrics and qualitative feedback. We can track employee engagement before and after implementing storytelling as a cornerstone of our corporate culture. This will show not just how many people are participating, but the impact their narratives have on morale and productivity." There was a rustling of papers and a few nods in the audience. Sarah's heart raced. This was the moment she needed to maintain momentum. If we create a platform for employees to share their stories, we won't just gather data, we'll cultivate a culture where people feel valued and understood. That in itself can lead to lower turnover rates, increased job satisfaction, and ultimately improved performance. This evidence will be our compass to guide decisions moving forward. The board members exchanged glances, and she could feel the shift in the atmosphere. For the first time, the conversation appeared to transition from skepticism to curiosity. She took a deep breath and pressed on. And if we promote this program internally as our commitment to fostering transparency and empathy, we not only harness the spirit of our workforce, but also establish our company as a leader in transformative corporate practice. The CEO leaned back in her chair, her expression contemplative. That air of command she carried relaxed slightly as she articulated, "You present a compelling case, but initiation requires resources. Are you confident our company will support this financially?" "Yes," Sarah replied with newfound assurance. "By investing in employee well-being today, we're ensuring tangible returns tomorrow. The intangible benefits, the goodwill generated, the stories shared, and the trust built, those will create a foundation for sustainable growth. Our employees want to be represented and understood. This program can lead to deeper loyalty and connection." With that, she had crossed a bridge, one that would transform her from a mere plaintiff pleading her case to an advocate for a potential employee. Reformation within the corporate landscape she had once found so daunting. Just as she felt momentum begin to coalesce, the cold board member who had initially scrutinized her broke into the conversation again, albeit with a note of curiosity. "And your own experiences, how do they align with the goals of this initiative?" Sarah felt a stirring in her chest, a blend of vulnerability and strength coursing through her. It was time to embody the stories that had shaped her. "My experience as a single mother, juggling the fears that follow from every paycheck, is quintessential to the authenticity of this initiative. I speak to the plight of so many voices that are unheard. This initiative isn't solely about data. It's a commitment to amplifying the human experience within our organization." A ripple of acknowledgement spread through the room. The tone had shifted. Her words were no longer battling against dismissals, but resonating with truths eyes were beginning to see anew. Then James interjected, his eyes shining with a shared belief. "This needs to be our legacy. It's not merely a report. It's about growing together through real stories, creating hope where none existed before." There was a palpable sense of solidarity as voices rose in anticipation of potential collaboration. As the dialogue unfolded, momentum surged as board members engaged in spirited discussions about the possibilities the initiative could create. One by one, they began to see the threads that connected each individual story to the corporate tapestry. This wasn't merely a reactive proposal. It had the potential to be a transformative movement. Finally, the CEO spoke, her voice now warm but firm. "I believe this initiative deserves evaluation. We will conduct a pilot program and measure its effects across various sectors of the organization. We cannot refuse to act upon the necessity of alignment between data and humanity." A wave of relief washed over Sarah, mixed with exhilaration. This was it, the moment she had doubted would ever arrive. The opportunity to bridge her world and the corporate giants she feared both existed in singular harmony now. Trust had been established, and she felt competent for the first time, an agent of change rather than an observer of circumstance. As the meeting wrapped, Sarah departed the building with a renewed sense of purpose. She was ready to cultivate this revolutionary idea, but she was also aware this was merely the beginning. Real transformation demanded ongoing commitment, not just from the leadership, but from herself to continue advocating fiercely for those without a voice. Days turned into weeks as they worked diligently on the pilot program. She rallied employees, listening intently to their stories, creating a safe space for those once silenced to express fear, hope, and resolve. Each narrative collected felt like layers of armor, fortifying not just the company, but strengthening her sense of identity. In those guided conversations, proposals turned into palpable movements. Her journey fostered a community of shared experiences that empowered individuals, emerging from mere stories into actionable insights. The program, launched with resounding success, confirmed by impressive engagement metrics and heartfelt testimonials. The commitment to humanizing the workplace bore fruit as employees felt more engaged, inspired, and revitalized to contribute meaningfully. As Sarah stood in front of her colleagues at their first community storytelling event, she felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. This was not just a position she had created, it was an identity she had shaped and cultivated. From a waitress navigating her fears to a sought-after advocate for cultural transformation, Sarah had conquered her defining challenges. And so she stood, a beacon of what it means to achieve impossible dreams. An undeniable testament to the power of stories, vulnerability, and unwavering resolve. She had claimed her place, becoming a force that not only influenced corporate change, but transformed how people connected. This was the future she had fought for, not just for herself, but for everyone now empowered to rise, lean into their humanity, and forge a path illuminated by their own narratives. Now it was time for you to take action. You need to subscribe immediately to this channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire and empower you. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support the message of transformation. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending. Your voice matters in this community. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and experience the strength of overcoming challenges through authentic storytelling. Don't wait even one more second to share this movement forward.